My name's Arya Siddhanta Das. The name Arya comes from the Vedic literature, and this name was given to me by my spiritual master. And Arya means one who knows the value of life. Siddhanta is a compound word. It's Siddha and Anta. So Siddha means perfection, and Anta means conclusion. So Das is the last part, which all Hare Krishnas have, and that means servant. So when you put my whole name together, you have the perfect conclusion you come to when you know the value of life, and I'm the servant of that. I was born in this body in Provo, Utah. My parents, as most would guess, were Mormon, of the Mormon background. But I never practiced that myself growing up. They left the church before I was conscious and aware of what God is and how religion works. So I never went to church growing up and things like that. I never really even knew that we were Mormon until I was a little bit older. I was a little older. And my father, he went on a mission when he was a young man. And then when he came back from Italy, his mission was in Italy, he came back and he married my mother in Utah. I'm not sure exactly where, but probably nearby where I was born. He went to BYU also. Actually, it does start from that early childhood, because a religion around my house was science, basically. Everything was very logical, and it fit into the scheme of sense perception and the scientific method, hypothesis, and all that. So we never went to church. We never did really any religious studies, but we were always encouraged to explore and find what we wanted to do for ourselves. So I didn't really even take any interest in religion or God, although there were a few times in my life where maybe I prayed to God and I wondered, why am I praying to something that I don't really know anything about? But basically I just dove into science. So I spent 7 years going to community college, on and off, and I never wanted to fit into one major, because I had this interest in studying all the scientific areas combinedly, and I thought maybe that would give me greater insight into quantum mechanics, which is what I was mostly interested in. Because when you look at quantum mechanics, it's kind of like you're examining one thing from many different angles simultaneously. So I thought, well, maybe I should just take the whole approach of science in the same way. So I had been studying for that a great amount of time. I have enough credits in science on the community college level to get a bachelor's degree, what a person would normally get a bachelor's degree. So I have a good understanding of a broad sense of science. And I was doing quantum mechanics studies on my own, because they only offer quantum mechanics for more advanced students of physics. And basically I was working on ideas like discovering the structure of quarks, and the grand unified theory, string theory, a lot of those more advanced physics principles. When I was about 11 years old, there was one night where I had these really severe leg cramps. So I was stretching while I was in bed. And as I was stretching really deep, I sort of entered into a sleep-like state, although I'm not really sure if it was sleeping or what it was. But in this condition, or this experience that I had, I was shown by what seemed to be a source beyond me, that what hardness was. And hardness was no distance in between something, in between two objects. We see here in the material world that there's always distance, like there's space in between atoms and space between particles, and always some space in between. But in this example, I was given some feeling or some description of what it was to be completely solid together in hardness. And then I was shown what softness was, which was kind of like two particles moving away from each other as fast as they can, kind of like the essence of softness, whereas as much distance between as was allowed. or conceivable, I guess you could say. And then I began to flip-flop back and forth between hard and soft. And this oscillation picked up its speed until hard and soft began to merge into one feeling, sort of. And at the time, I didn't know what this was. I couldn't really understand it. But I had a tremendous sense of euphoria from having this experience. And I kind of lost my conception of who I was, or if I was here on Earth, or what was going on altogether. And I entered into what I understand a little bit better now to be certain things, but at that age I didn't have a clue. Finally, I got so blissed out. I call it now frightening bliss, because it was so powerful and incredible that it was like hard to understand like how it could be right. So I started getting some desire to go back to normalcy, so to speak. And then I woke up, or I guess you could call it waking up, came to external consciousness, and I could feel upon waking energy running around my body, just like flowing in a really sensual, euphoric kind of way. And this lasted for quite some time, maybe like 30 minutes. And I just laid in bed just experiencing that energy as it moved around me. And I thought, wow, that's just the most amazing thing I think that person could experience. It was just so amazing. I was working at Pizza Hut, and I was a delivery driver. So, when you start delivering, you get like a little front of cash to give change. So on this day, I didn't have any money to my name personally, and I was out of drugs. But my drug dealer lived very nearby my Pizza Hut work. So I figured, well, I've got this $20 in bank that they've given me, and usually I can get by without using my bank. So I'm just gonna go over to my drug dealer's house and get some marijuana. So I went to his house, and I got it, and I smoked some of it, and I came back to work, and I was thinking, all right, let the deliveries begin. I'm ready to work. That entire day, there were no deliveries at Pizza Hut, and about halfway through the day, I really started to worry. Oh no, I'm gonna lose my job. Or started calculating all the different ways to get around it. Like, I'll just tell him I don't know what happened to it, or that I had to use it for gas in my car. Trying to figure everything out. But then it kind of dawned on me, like, really, is it really worth it all? I mean, what are you really getting out of this job anyway? Why don't you just be honest and just accept whatever you get in return? Just be honest about it. So I started feeling like that. And then I became convinced. But then I thought, well, maybe I can get some help from this. So I started to pray to God. And now I prayed to God a few times in my life, but never really seriously. So this is the first time that I ever really seriously prayed to God. And because I already had no money, and I was basically going down the slope to just insignificant a life, meaningless life, and so I was reaching a bottom, because I was about to lose my job too, and then I had nothing. And so first I prayed to God something to the effect of, if you will help me in this situation, I'll be very grateful. Something like that. Please help me in this situation. And then I thought, well, maybe that's not enough. Maybe I need to pray a little, get a little deeper. So I dug in a little deeper, and I said, all right, God, if you will help me figure out this situation so I don't lose my job, I will repay you in some way. And then I started thinking, well, but how will I repay God? And so I came to the conclusion that if God were to show me very clearly, I was thinking this in my mind, really show me that he was going to help me out by doing some giving me a sign. I think I even prayed in that way. If you give me a sign that you really have your hand in this, then I will give it back to you with so much more in return. because then you will have shown me something. And that was the first time that I can remember in my life that I really relied on God to help me. Many other times before, I had calculated so many ways. I always felt like somebody was helping me along the way. Like, there were so many times in my life where I couldn't understand how I made it through that next month, or I always felt like, at times I called it like guardian angel or this, that, or the other, but looking back, I really think God was helping me in a lot of different ways. So, sure enough, this story is amazing to me. I don't know how God arranges these things. But it came time, it wasn't even time for me to go home, but it was so slow that my manager approached me and said, "There's other drivers coming in, you got to go home." And I was sorry you didn't make anything today. I was like, "Oh, that's all right." So he was like, "All right, well, come, give your bank back and let's go check out over here." So I'm walking over there getting ready to tell him, but basically I took that money and I spent it on drugs. Sorry. What can I do? You can fire me now, or it's basically I got to that point. I think one part that helps in this whole situation is I became honest. I just said, I should just be honest about who I am now. Why am I running around fooling myself about who I am? And so we walked up to the front counter, and he said, "Oh, hold on one sec." And he went back into the back room, and he came back with an envelope, and he said, "Did you know that the first week that you worked here, which was like a year back, did you know you forgot to pick up your first paycheck?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Yeah, you never picked it up. So here's that first paycheck." And I was like, "You gotta be kidding me." And he's like, "No." So he hands me, now I have a check. Now that doesn't give me $20. I look up at the clock, and it's 4:55 on the clock. My bank is Washington Mutual. It's right across the street, but it closes at 5. It's so perfectly arranged. I say, "Well, because it was the weekend. It was like getting Friday or Saturday or something like that." I said, "I really need this money for the weekend." It must have been Friday because the bank's not open that late on Saturday. I said, "I really need this money for the weekend. Is there any way before you check me out that I can run over there and cash this check really quick and just, we can work it out when I come back?" He's like, "Oh yeah, no problem." When I walked out that door, just like opening the door, it was like walking out of that Pizza Hut, it was like I opened the door of spiritual life in many ways, because it was the first time that God and I had this like really quite obvious reciprocation with each other. Now, where Krishna conscious comes into play is in my study of physics, as I was getting deeper and deeper into the core of the fundamental particles, going into first understanding the atom, and then the electron, and then the proton, and the neutron, and the quarks inside, and bosons, and all these tiny particles, I began to see some need for a source of where the energy was coming from, or how the energy was relating. And that sort of piqued my interest in spiritual life. But I didn't really pursue it at that time. So then I think the turning point was when I had I reached kind of like a bottom point where I basically had nothing. I'd done a lot of drugs and just lost hope in a lot of ways, and really finding answers to life and things like that. So one of my friends let me move in with him, and he was in an occult magic society. Now, just prior to that, my memory doesn't serve me so well around this time, so it's kind of all jumbled together. But I think just prior to that, I had been studying things like the Kabbalah and stuff like that, more from a scientific standpoint, kind of like trying to defeat spiritual or pseudo-spiritual philosophies and dovetail it into the scientific-minded way. And so this friend invited me to live with him, and I found out he was in this group that was called the OTO, the can't remember, Ordoris Templis Orientalis, something like that. And it's Aleister Crowley and his whole method. At the time, I didn't really understand what that method was, but now I can see it's a hodgepodge or a mix and match of several different Eastern cultures. Like Ashtanga yoga is definitely in there, and a lot of other yoga processes. So I joined this group, and I became what they call a Minerval. It was like the neophyte stage. And I started doing the ritualistic practices. But in order to join the group, you had to be free of intoxication. So I gave up intoxication for about 6 months while I was in that group. But the desire for intoxication grew again around the time that I was going to make my first step of advancement. So I got together with the leader of that group and just said, I don't think I can do this. I'm not able to overcome my intoxication. I really don't feel like the process is working. So at that time, I also said maybe I should become a monk, and get into some place where I can be free of these desires and the influence that the world has on me. And he said, well, if you can't do this, there's no way you're going to be a monk, because this is like preparation for being a monk. So I was really disappointed. And then I still continued. That experience kind of opened me up to studying other faiths more. So I joined like a Bible study groups, and I talked with people in the Lutheran church. And so I really went and practiced and tried a lot of their methods, so many different spiritual groups. And I mentioned the Kabbalah also. But I wasn't really finding a lot of answers in anything. Although I was feeling that this was a good path for me to study these religions and try to understand them. Then my friend had this book called The Science of Self-Realization, which is a Hare Krishna book, but I didn't really know anything about Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, or what's known as Vaishnavism, was sort of like the last thing that I ran into of all the different faiths. So right around this time when I was starting to read that book, I was very heavy into Buddhism. I was reading about the Four Noble Truths and the Dalai Lama, and starting to get into the principle of ahimsa, the non-violence, and being really good to others and things like that, developing like good karma, I guess. And so I had that book in my possession for a long time, always wanting to read it but never really reading it. And I was still very scientific minded at this point. And one day I decided, okay, I've got to read the book. It just irked me so much. But I was mostly into defeating pseudo-spiritual books. So I opened it up and I looked in through the chapter headings to see which area would I attack first. And I looked into this section called The Tiny World of Modern Science. And, being the science-minded person I was, there's the spot. So I opened up that section and I read one line out of that book. And just this one line shook me up so much that I had to close the book after that. And what it said was, the materialist, something along these lines, the materialist thinks that all life comes from matter, but the spiritual-minded person knows that all matter comes from life. And I was defeated in that one sentence. It made so much sense to me. I closed the book and I was like, oh my gosh. I was thinking I was going to defeat the book, but it just destroyed me in one sentence. So I didn't really know what that book was about, where it was from, or anything. I was kind of interested in it because it was called The Science of Self-Realization. And I was thinking, what kind of science is that, And then it took me some more time of going through school and searching into physics and kind of going through some struggles. I had become more or less a trance DJ, and I was really into making music, and I was also in a band at that time, fairly successful band. And my friend and I, we spent all of our money on music and drugs, basically. We didn't even really feed ourselves. So one day he was looking through the paper and he saw this ad for come to the Hare Krishna temple. It's considered the best vegetarian meal in San Diego for 2006 or something like that. So I was living in San Diego. And so we thought, we didn't care vegetarian or not, free food, we're going. So we went down to the temple, and right when I walked in, I immediately could feel that, this was something of interest to me, because it wasn't any of the traditions I had seen before, and I thought, maybe this is a group of monks that I could practice with. I could see there were monks around. But the thing that struck me the most about that first visit was the taste of the food was so unique and amazing. Like the spicing, I'd never tasted anything like that. And there was one picture of the founder of our movement, Srila Prabhupada. It's the centennial picture, and he's looking very compassionately, like kind of like off in the distance, but in his the way his eyebrows looked kind of really attracted me with the compassion that they had. And I could sense like he was talking to me directly, calling me in and saying, I would like you to help me in some way. That was the feeling that I got. So I had a very good impression of going that first time. And I would go to the temple after that, like once every couple weeks. And then it started to become once a week. And then it started to become a couple times a week. And finally it built up. My girlfriend and I had a girlfriend at that time. We both were going to the temple every single day to eat. And when the real light started to turn on that there was something interesting going on with this food and the people there was when I couldn't go to the temple, I felt bad. There was something like totally missing from my life. And if I could, I felt great. It was like, I got a chance to go again. So then I realized I've got to figure out what their philosophy is, what it is that they're doing. So I started going to this Bhagavad Gita class, and the devotee who taught me was named Dravida. And he was so expert at teaching the Bhagavad Gita and the principles in there. In about 1 week of going to class with him, I gave up almost all intoxication that I had been doing. Like even quitting smoking, which was for me probably the hardest of them all. And the way that he convinced me is a really interesting story. He said, do you think that you're ignorant? I said, no. He said, well, you see that warning label on your cigarette pack there? Yeah. He said, are you ignoring that? And I said, well, yeah. He says, ignoring means ignorant. And it's like, those words are so obviously rooted in the same thing, but it never really occurred to me, like, yeah, I'm ignorant. I'm ignoring that. So I thought, that was pretty miraculous how he was able to transform things these habits I didn't really like about myself. And he was able to do that. It really convinced me that there was some potency in the Hare Krishna philosophy. And about a week after that, I was going through so many different struggles. And I had been starting to chant Hare Krishna, but not on the beads. Just kind of singing it around and things like that. So I went to a class with Dravida, and he said, he was reading from the book, and then he gave a little lecture. He said, an intelligent person gradually surrenders to Krishna, but the most intelligent person surrenders to Krishna right now. And when he said that, it was like a gong went off in my head, like, right now, like, and I was like, yes, I should do this right now. So after that class, I approached him and said, I think I want to come join here and be a part of this. And he agreed. But we didn't really set, like, they were still kind of checking me out at that time, seeing where I was at, because obviously I had some intoxication issues that I was dealing with. So finally, I had really gotten into the drug ecstasy, and it appears that I took it to the point where it wasn't getting me high anymore. And I was over at my friend's house. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and we had been doing ecstasy and some other types of intoxication all night long until 4 a.m. And I just wasn't feeling any euphoria. I was getting nothing from it, which was strange to me. Like I never had experienced that. So I told my friend, I think I'm going to go to the Hare Krishna temple, because Dravida had been speaking about the ecstasy of devotional service. And so I was thinking, well, I'm not getting any ecstasy here, so maybe I should go there. And he's like, you can't go there. He's like, it's 4 a.m. You're going to walk in the door. You're going to look so terrible. And he's like, no way. I'm not letting you walk out this door. And he literally tried to drag me, like to hold me back from getting in my car and driving away. And definitely, I probably shouldn't have been driving. But I thought, no, I was determined. I want to go to the Hare Krishna temple and do this morning program that I've heard about, and try this chanting that's supposed to bring this ecstasy. So I did it. I went to the temple, and sure enough, they gave me some beads after a little ceremony that we have in the morning. They gave me some beads, and I started chanting, and I really felt like I was transported into like a spiritual atmosphere where I was feeling some bliss, some real reciprocation. So that really convinced me that there was something to the chanting, and the devotees, they were taking such good care of me. I really felt like they really had my best interest in mind. So I decided that, I'm going to join, and they also started to gain a little more confidence in me, I guess, from seeing me come like in that way. And then I joined on Janmashtami, which is Lord Krishna's appearance day. It was like really right around that time. And it's almost Janmashtami now, too, ironically. So this is going to be like my 5th year in Krishna consciousness. And as soon as I joined, it was something that just came naturally to me. Somebody, I think it was Dravida, he approached me at one point and said, "You're chanting nicely." Said, "You must have been doing this in your past life." And I felt like, yeah, probably. I mean, it really felt like something that was just second nature. Just tolerate it. Go on with your practice. Go on with your devotional life. So I'm really trying to imbibe that now. It's not easy. I mean, still every day I'm catching myself in so many different ways that, oh, you're letting it bother you again, or you're getting elated here over some temporary enjoyment. But gradually, by doing the chanting process and the ritualistic activities, it's said that you're guaranteed to get free of that. And I believe I'm experiencing that.
You've answered so many of the questions I have just by what you shared, but I just had one other request. I don't know if it's appropriate or if you'd be willing to, but I was so moved by your chanting. Would you ever be willing to chant as part of the interview?
Yeah.
I know you don't have the harmonium here with us, which adds a lot, but...
You mean just here now?
Yeah.
Sure.
Maybe whatever would be meaningful to you now.
Well, the chanting of Hare Krishna is the most important part of the process. It's the purifying agent for all other aspects of the devotional life, and it brings one to the level of devotional service, and getting free of these miseries. So I couldn't be more happy than to chant for you. Okay, shall I just sing now? Chanting is yeah, the one that seems to resonate more recently, I guess, because from time to time it's always something different. But right now there's this verse. It's matra sparshas tu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dugadaha agama payino nityas tongues titikshasva bharata. And it basically boils down to this, that just as the winter and summer seasons come and go, they're always in change and transition. Similarly, the disturbances of the mind, whether you're elated or you're greatly dissatisfied, those also come, and they're constantly changing. But a person who can tolerate those things is nicely situated in spiritual consciousness, realizing that they're just temporary. It won't be very long until the other comes. So if you don't, basically what I'm getting out of this is that the mind is just like, we don't ask for suffering, and similarly we don't really have to ask for enjoyment. They just come of their own accord. Like, nobody wanted the tsunami, And nobody ever asked, oh, well, can I win the lottery? It's just like something that just kind of falls on you by some fate, as they may call it, or we understand it to be karma. So, but these things come. So how do you deal with it? And I've always had a lot of trouble with my mind. It hasn't really been much of a friend to me. So this idea of getting control over your mind and not letting these temporary disturbances bother you. Well, I guess a part of that is realizing that you are something that's beyond the temporary, because there's a way to get free of this flipping back and forth between elation and dissatisfaction. So, or hankering and lamentation and enjoyment, right? So, for me, that's something that I really need. I've suffered so much just from trying to understand relationships and how to communicate with other people, and the mind is such a difficult thing for me to deal with. And my mind is very active too. Like at night I always have trouble sleeping because it just wants to keep figuring more and more out. So being able to abate the mind like that, and having this realization that I'm an eternal person and I'm something separate from all temporary things, that to me is like a great relief. It's like something that really, it's beyond anything in this material world. You don't hear people talk about things like that in the material world, like that this suffering and this enjoyment is not related to you, so don't be attached to it. But just tolerate it. Go on with your practice. Go on with your devotional life. So I'm really trying to imbibe that now. It's not easy. I mean, still every day I'm catching myself in so many different ways that, oh, you're letting it bother you again, or you're getting elated here over some temporary enjoyment. But gradually, by doing the chanting process and the ritualistic activities, it's said that you're guaranteed to get free of that. And I believe I'm experiencing that. What am I grateful for? I mean, if you take a person and just strip them down to the point of near suicide and wanting absolutely, nothing to do with this material world anymore, just totally disgusted with how everything works, not understanding, totally bewildered, no idea of what to do, what not to do in life, and you put them into just the opposite position where you completely know what the meaning of life is, and why we exist, and there's a reason to live, and everything's positive, everything's just wonderful now. To go from those two extremes, I have to say that I'm just grateful for the Vedic knowledge. I mean, the knowledge in the Vedas is so profoundly true. And I mean, it's not sectarian in any way. Anybody could apply these principles in their life, regardless of what religious background they have or upbringing. They're eternal truths, and for me, they're so profound in their ability to give me relief from suffering. I'm so grateful that those teachings exist. If I could have any one thing, it would be that the people of this world would get relief from their suffering. That's the one thing I wish. Myself first. Because if I'm not free of that suffering, how can I convince anyone else of it? So I don't feel it's a selfish desire. I feel I want freedom. I want my own liberation in terms of going back to God. That's our idea of liberation. Not that you get free of misery or whatever, but that I become fully devoted in my service to God, and that I'm able to somehow convince or influence others by my own example of this path of going back to God and the value in it. But the best would be if anyone came along from any place, anywhere, and could give the people of the world freedom from suffering. That would really be, that would be magical. And I think that's what's going on here. That's why I'm a part of it. I care about you, but I just don't know how to express it in the perfect way that we always see eye to eye. But I would want to, I really want to be able to do that. I really care about people so much, but I have such a hard time relating all the time. It's like the nature of the world. And even if I know it's a long answer, but maybe you can chop it into the right idea, but just to have a relationship with everybody that's heading in the right direction. I guess when a person suffers for so long and they don't see any hope in the world anymore, if they're really intelligent or considerate, they consider, or they understand that the other people in the world must be feeling these things too. So why would you want that for anyone? And because I've gotten so much relief, I wish that they would too. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare